For more on this story, we are joined by Robert Gutsche. He is an associate professor at Lancaster University and the author of The Future of the Presidency, Journalism and Democracy After Trump, and he joins us now live from the UK. Thank you so much for joining us here on the NewsHour today. Now, Biden started off strong, taking the pandemic head on, but it seems like he's been losing support, especially with high inflation now in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, this is a balance between what a government can do to make changes for its economy and what for-profit, very profitable businesses and capitalism can do to benefit the public. I mean, but Joe Biden has also on his report card has to look at how he's operating within Congress, trying to get legislation passed, not just for the economy, but for other aspects of the social good, and how he's dealing with COVID. I mean, what was most striking, not just in the long lines of people at these food lines that you showed, is the continued use of masks. I mean, he constantly has to be balancing the economic good with trying to deal with COVID. It's a very hard time for him right now.
Let's talk a bit about Afghanistan and his decision to completely pull U.S. troops out of the country. How would you evaluate that major event being done on his watch? And do you think that that has added to the decrease in support for him?
Well, certainly, you know, Afghanistan is one of the first marks of his presidency. I mean, that was where he came out and said, I'm going to leave a lasting impression on the voters, but also on the role of military in the United States. I mean, that's one thing. There are so many other things, though, that aren't consistent with his sort of progressive stance on Afghanistan, which is changing some of the policies with immigration at the southern border, right? He's doing the same things that Barack Obama and even Donald Trump were doing in many ways. Not closing Guantanamo Bay, right? That's also a human rights and a military sort of decision, because that goes back to the days after 9/11 and holding people without fair trials. So the Afghanistan moment was his first sort of provocative moment where he says, I'm going to stand for something. However, we're seeing kind of the same sort of status quo relationship with Russia. We're seeing Joe Biden not necessarily being straightforward about what his plans are for his next presidency, and that becomes important as we're entering into midterm elections. And so Afghanistan was that first moment, and either he needs to show that that was meaningful and has some sort of positive outcome, or people are going to forget that it's happening because they're focusing on putting food on the table.
All right, you mentioned midterm elections, and of course, I am expecting him to once again run for presidency in the next term. How do you think that's going to play out for him? What does he have to do at this point to make sure he still has enough support?
Well, I think it's striking when he comes out and says that he's not sure if he's going to be running. It's if he's up to it, if it's in the cards, if fate allows, right? These types of answers aren't necessarily what I think American voters for Biden want to hear. I think they want to hear a definite, yes, I will be running. We're not there yet, but yes, I will be, because it leaves the party kind of asking, well, who's really in charge here and who's running for it? Are we going to have a lame duck president coming midterm elections if we don't have somebody coming out and saying, you know, I'm swinging the bat at the next election, and if Donald Trump wants to run, as he's been teasing, I'll take him on. So I think that what he has to do is really shore up the party. He has to shore up what his successes have been in this first year. And there has to be measurable movement on the economy and certainly on COVID. There are lots of different cards in the play here, but he has to come out very strongly and very assertively, even in his presence in the optics, and say, I'm the president and I want to be president again. Let's keep going. We got to win the midterms.
Right, and Biden had also garnered a lot of attention when he announced Kamala Harris as his running mate and, of course, his vice president. And we saw a strong bond between the two in the beginning, but now it seems like she's not as active as people expected her to be. What do you think's happening there?
Yeah, there's been a lot of reporting from insider politics talking about that there's some tension between the two. And really, that's just as much between maybe the two individuals as the two offices. I mean, the vice president's office does want to operate with some sort of autonomy from the office of the president, have different agendas, have their own say and their own voice. So there is a tension almost in every administration between those two offices. But in this particular one, it is a bit shocking because they were so tight. The optics there were very clear that they were in this together. And she has, unfortunately, some sort of spotlight on her based upon her sex and her gender and her race that is magnified for her. And so there is that tension between them not necessarily communicating, not being involved in the same ways that I think Harris would like to be. And so that is going to be a tension going forward. So again, we need to see who Joe Biden is, who he thinks he is and wants to be from the president position, and see that there is still that tight bond between them because she brings votes.
All right, Robert Gutsche, thank you so much for your time and joining us here on the NewsHour.